The stars glittered against the endless black of space as the UESC Defiant sliced through the void, leading humanity's small fleet toward their first diplomatic mission with an alien civilization. Captain Alan Murphy stood on the bridge, his weathered face illuminated by the soft blue glow of the ship's displays. At 45, Murphy had spent most of his adult life preparing for this moment. Approaching Keldorian Space Captain, Lieutenant, Olivia Wright announced from her tactical station. Her fingers danced across the control panel with practiced precision. Their escort vessels are moving to intercept. Murphy nodded, straightening his uniform jacket. Standard approach, Lieutenant. Let's not give them any reason for concern. Through the massive viewscreen, Murphy watched as 3 enormous vessels appeared, dwarfing his flagship. The Keldorian ships bristled with weapon ports and gleamed with a strange, iridescent metal unknown to Earth science. "My God," whispered Dr. Gregory Bennett, the xenobiologist who had joined the bridge crew for first contact. "They're massive." The comm system crackled to life, and a deep, rumbling voice filled the bridge. "Human vessels, maintain your current trajectory. Any deviation will be considered hostile action." "Friendly bunch," Murphy muttered before tapping his communication badge. "This is Captain Alan Murphy of the United Earth Space Command vessel Defiant. We come in peace as representatives of humanity." The Keldorian ships positioned themselves around the human fleet, 15 ships in total, the pride of Earth space program. The human vessels, while advanced, looked tiny beside the alien armada that began to appear on their long-range sensors. "I'm detecting over 200 ships just in this sector, Captain," Lieutenant Wright reported, her voice tight. Many of them appear to be capital-class warships. Admiral Patricia Clark, who had been quietly observing from the side of the bridge, stepped forward. Her silver hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her eyes narrowed as she studied the tactical display. "Remember your training, everyone. We knew they would outnumber us. Our mission is diplomatic, not military." The journey to the Keldorian homeworld took 3 hours, during which the human crew marveled at the scale of the alien civilization. Space stations larger than Earth cities orbited planets stripped of resources. Countless ships moved in perfect formation, displaying a military precision that made Earth's best naval exercises look like children playing in a pool. When they finally reached the Keldorian homeworld, Zul-Qadar, the delegation prepared to disembark. Captain Murphy, Admiral Clark, Dr. Bennett, and Lieutenant Wright would represent humanity in this historic meeting. "Remember," Admiral Clark briefed them one final time, "we offer friendship and trade, but make no commitments that would compromise Earth's security. We know almost nothing about their culture or intentions." The shuttle bay of the Keldorian flagship was cavernous, easily large enough to house the entire human delegation's ship. Armed guards lined the walls, each Keldorian standing nearly 9 feet tall with gray-blue skin and 4 arms. Their body armor pulsed with energy currents, and their weapons made the standard-issue human pulse rifles look like toys. "Welcome to the heart of the Keldorian Empire," announced a tall figure who stepped forward from the others. Dr. Bennett whispered to Murphy, "That's got to be someone important, based on the markings on their armor." The tall Keldorian continued, "I am High Commander Zulvex, Supreme Military Authority of the Keldorian people and voice of Emperor Draknar. You will follow me to the council chambers." The human delegation was led through corridors that seemed designed to intimidate, massive hallways decorated with what appeared to be trophies of war from conquered species. Captain Murphy noticed Admiral Clark taking careful mental notes of everything they passed. The council chamber itself was a vast amphitheater filled with hundreds of Keldorian officials. The human delegation stood in the center, feeling small and exposed as thousands of alien eyes studied them. High Commander Zulvex took his place on an elevated platform. "So these are the humans who have recently begun to crawl beyond their home system," he announced, his voice carrying effortlessly through the chamber. "They come with a mighty fleet of 15 vessels." He emphasized the number in a way that caused ripples of laughter to spread through the assembled Keldorians. Admiral Clark stepped forward. "On behalf of the United Earth government, we extend greetings and an offer of peaceful—" "Peace?" interrupted Zulvex. "Your species knows nothing of true power or peace. We have watched your development, You fight among yourselves for scraps of land and resources. Your technology is primitive. Your fleet, he gestured dismissively, is barely worth acknowledging. More laughter echoed through the chamber. Murphy felt his face grow hot but maintained his composure. This was too important for personal pride. Perhaps, Murphy said, stepping beside Admiral Clark, you judge too quickly, High Commander. Humanity has much to offer in trade and cultural exchange. Our differences could strengthen both our peoples. Dr. Bennett moved closer to Murphy and whispered, Captain, I'm noticing something in their physiology. Their neck ridges flush when they're feeling superior or confident. It's almost universal among them right now. Zulvex descended from his platform, towering over the human delegation. Each of his forearms ended in clawed hands that looked strong enough to tear through metal. Let me be direct, humans. The Keldorian Empire does not form alliances. We accept submissions. Your species will submit to Keldorian authority. Your resources, your planets, your people will serve the Empire. That's not possible, Admiral Clark replied firmly. Earth and her colonies are sovereign territories. We came seeking friendship, not subjugation. Zulvex's upper arms crossed over his chest in what seemed to be a gesture of dismissal. Then you came in vain. However, the Emperor is merciful. You have 30 days to reconsider your position. Return to your homeworld. Prepare your leaders for the inevitable. And if we maintain our position? Murphy asked, though he already knew the answer. Then you will learn what happens to those who refuse the Empire's generosity, Zulvex said. His voice had dropped to a dangerous rumble. Your 15 ships are charming, Captain. Our smallest battle group has hundreds. Our full fleet numbers in the thousands. Consider this when you return to your leaders. With that, the meeting was over. The human delegation was escorted back to their shuttle with minimal courtesy. As they departed the Keldorian flagship, Dr. Bennett was busy making notes on his tablet. Their overconfidence is fascinating, he said. They've likely never encountered a species that could challenge them militarily. And neither have they now, Lieutenant Wright said grimly. Our entire fleet wouldn't last an hour against what we've seen of their forces. Captain Murphy remained quiet until they were safely back aboard the Defiant and underway toward Earth. Once the senior staff had gathered in the ship's conference room, Admiral Clark turned to him. Captain, your assessment? Murphy looked at each face around the table before speaking. They've shown their hand completely. No subterfuge, no diplomatic cushioning. They expect us to either surrender or be destroyed. Their technology is advanced, Dr. Bennett added, but not unrecognizably so. They've simply had more time to build larger forces. Admiral Clark nodded gravely. Then we proceed with contingency protocol Trojan Horse. As soon as we're far enough from their sensors, transmit a tight beam message to Earth. All details of what we've seen, all specifications we've managed to scan. The room fell silent as the weight of their situation settled on every shoulder. They mocked our ships, our weapons, our very existence, Murphy finally said, breaking the silence. But they don't understand what humanity does when cornered. Admiral Clark's lips formed, a thin smile that held no humor. No, they don't, and that will be their undoing. The emergency meeting room deep within Luna Base hummed with tension. Projected holograms showed the Keldorian ships, their massive size making even the most seasoned military leaders shift uncomfortably in their seats. Admiral Patricia Clark stood at the head of the table, her face grim as she finished briefing Earth's combined military command on their first contact with the Keldorians. 30 days, General Kevin Rodriguez said, breaking the heavy silence. They've given us 30 days before they attack. His weathered face showed no fear, only calm calculation. After 30 years of military service, he had seen humanity overcome seemingly impossible odds before. Can we evacuate any colonies? Asked one of the other officers. Admiral Clark shook her head. Not without the Keldorians noticing. Their sensor technology is advanced. Any large-scale movement would alert them. Captain Alan Murphy, who had been quietly watching from the side of the room, stepped forward. With respect, Admiral, perhaps now is the time to reveal our true capabilities. All eyes turned to him. Admiral Clark nodded slowly. Captain Murphy is right. The deception has served its purpose. She pressed a button on the table, and the room's security level increased. Air gap protocols activated, cutting off any possible electronic surveillance. What would be discussed next was known to fewer than 50 people on Earth. Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral Clark began, humanity's apparent vulnerability, our small fleet of only 15 ships, was never a weakness. It was a carefully crafted deception. General Rodriguez took over. For the past 20 years, while publicly building our conventional fleet, we've been developing something else entirely. He brought up new schematics on the display. Project Pandemic. Chief Engineer Samantha Powell stood up. With her round glasses and practical ponytail, she looked more like a university professor than the architect of humanity's most advanced weapons system. "What you're seeing is why we only needed 15 ships," she said, pointing to microscopic structures displayed on the screen. "These are adaptive military-grade nanites." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Powell continued. "After the resource wars, humanity learned a harsh lesson. Conventional warfare was too costly, too destructive. We needed something smarter." She zoomed in on the display. "Each of our ships carries billions of these nanites. They can repair damage almost instantly, adapt to enemy weapons, and, most importantly, infect enemy systems." Dr. Nathan Harris, a thin man with kind eyes that belied his brilliant mind, joined Powell at the display. "We developed this technology for peaceful purposes initially, medical applications, environmental restoration. But we always knew it could be weaponized." "So our 15 ships are just delivery systems?" asked one of the admirals. "Exactly," Murphy confirmed. "The Keldorians saw what we wanted them to see, a small, under-equipped fleet that poses no threat. What they didn't see were the nanite production facilities hidden throughout the asteroid belt." General Rodriguez brought up tactical displays showing the solar system. "We've been preparing for this possibility since we first detected signals from the Keldorian Empire 8 years ago. Director Mitchell's intelligence teams have been gathering data on their technology, their communications, their weaknesses." Director Frank Mitchell, head of Earth's intelligence operations, nodded. His face remained expressionless as he spoke. "We've identified several vulnerabilities in Keldorian systems. Their technology relies heavily on quantum processors similar to our own designs but more advanced. However, this makes them perfect targets for our nanites." Engineer Powell took control of the display again. "The nanites can infiltrate their systems through any physical connection: air filtration, cooling, systems, maintenance access points. Once inside, they can replicate using available materials and reprogram Keldorian technology from within." "What about ethical constraints?" asked a civilian representative from the United Earth government. Dr. Harris stepped forward. "The nanites are programmed with strict limitations. They cannot target life support systems on civilian vessels or habitats. They cannot modify themselves beyond certain parameters, and they have a built-in expiration date. This isn't about extermination. It's about neutralizing a threat." Admiral Clark retook control of the meeting. "Our strategy is simple but effective. Captain Murphy's fleet will engage the Keldorians when they inevitably attack. The nanites will be deployed during the battle. Even if we lose ships, and we will, the nanites will have done their job." "And then?" asked General Rodriguez. "Then we negotiate from a position of strength," Admiral Clark replied. "The Keldorians clearly respect only power. We'll show them that size isn't everything." The meeting continued for hours as they refined the plan. When it finally ended, Captain Murphy and Engineer Powell walked together down the sterile hallway of Luna Base. "Will it work, Sam?" Murphy asked quietly when they were alone. Powell pushed her glasses up her nose. "The simulations are promising, but there are always variables we can't predict." She looked out a viewport at the stars. "The biggest risk is if they detect the nanites before infection reaches critical mass." "How long would that take?" "Once deployed, about 72 hours for complete system compromise of their fleet." She paused. "Alan, these nanites are learning machines. They'll adapt to whatever they encounter." Murphy nodded slowly. "Like humanity has always done." Later that evening, Murphy stood alone on the observation deck. watching Earth rotate slowly beneath him. The blue-green planet seemed so fragile, from here so worth protecting. His thoughts were interrupted when Admiral Clark joined him. "Having doubts, Captain?" she asked. "Not about the mission," he replied. "Just thinking about how the Keldorians laughed at our fleet." "An old human failing," she said, "judging by size alone." "I grew up on a small farm in Nebraska," Murphy said. "My father taught me that the smallest creatures often have the most potent defenses. A rattlesnake doesn't need to be big to be deadly." Admiral Clark smiled. "A fitting analogy. The Keldorians see themselves as the apex predator in the galaxy. They've never encountered a species that evolved as both predator and prey." The next 3 weeks passed in careful preparation. The 15 ships of Earth's fleet received final upgrades. The nanite production facilities worked around the clock. Intelligence agents planted within Keldorian territory reported fleet movements suggesting they were preparing for an assault even before the 30-day deadline. On the 28th day, Captain Murphy stood on the bridge of the Defiant once more, his crew ready at their stations. Lieutenant Wright had personally overseen the tactical preparations of all 15 ships. Dr. Bennett had completed his analysis of Keldorian biology, providing valuable insights into their psychology and likely battle tactics. "All ships report ready, Captain," Lieutenant Wright announced. "Very good, Lieutenant," Murphy replied. He opened a channel to the fleet. "Men and women of the United Earth Space Command, this is Captain Murphy. Tomorrow we face an enemy that believes they have already won. They look at our 15 ships and see weakness. They don't understand that humanity has always thrived against overwhelming odds." He paused, looking at the determined faces of his bridge crew. "We don't need 1,000 ships, we don't need the biggest guns. What we need is already within us. The intelligence to adapt, the courage to stand firm, and the wisdom to know that true strength isn't measured by size." Admiral Clark, who was aboard the Defiant for this mission, stepped forward. "The Keldorians believe numbers determine victory. We know better. Tomorrow we'll show them what it means to face a species that evolved as both predator and prey. To face humanity." As the human fleet moved into defensive positions around the colony world of New Horizon, deliberately chosen as the battlefield, Murphy couldn't help but smile slightly. The Keldorians would bring their massive fleet, expecting an easy victory. They would learn how wrong they were. The sky above New Horizon glowed with unnatural light as the colony's orbital defense platforms activated their shields. On the planet's surface, civilians hurried into underground shelters while military personnel moved with practiced efficiency to their battle stations. Commander Lisa Martinez watched from the colony's command center as the evacuation proceeded smoothly. "Status report," she demanded, her voice steady despite the tension filling the room. 93% of civilians are in shelters," replied her second-in-command. "Colonel Russell has ground forces in position. Orbital defenses at full power." Commander Martinez nodded, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. 15 green dots representing Earth's fleet were positioned in a defensive formation around the planet. But it was the massive red swarm appearing at the edge of the system that made her stomach tighten. "That can't be right," she whispered. "Lieutenant Bailey, verify these readings." Lieutenant Eric Bailey, the communications specialist, checked his instruments twice. "Readings confirmed, Commander. I'm detecting over 200 Keldorian warships. They're 2 days early. In orbit above New Horizon, Captain Murphy received the same information on the bridge of the Defiant. He exchanged a look with Admiral C. Clark. "They're not waiting for their own deadline," Murphy said. "They want to catch us unprepared." Admiral Clark's expression remained calm. "Begin Trojan Horse Protocol. Alert all ships." Lieutenant Wright worked quickly at her tactical station. "All ships acknowledge, Admiral. Nanite deployment systems ready." The bridge crew watched in silence as the Keldorian fleet approached. The Gyu enemy ships moved in perfect formation, their massive hulls gleaming in the light of New Horizon's sun. They outnumbered the human fleet more than 13-1. "They're hailing us, Captain," Lieutenant Bailey reported from his communications station. "On screen," Murphy ordered. The familiar face of High Commander Zulvex appeared, his forearms crossed in what they now recognized as a gesture of superiority. "Captain Murphy, the Keldorian commander said, his voice filled with mock sympathy. I see you chose to defend this insignificant colony rather than your homeworld. A poor strategic decision. Murphy stood tall, hands clasped behind his back. Our deadline hasn't expired, High Commander. This is a violation of your own terms. Zolvex laughed, the sound rumbling through the bridge speakers. Terms are for equals, human. We are not equals. His upper right hand made a dismissive gesture. Surrender now and we will spare the colonists. Resist and we will make an example of New Horizon. We decline your generous offer, Murphy replied evenly. This colony is under Earth's protection. Very well. Zolvex's face showed no surprise, only satisfaction. You will witness the futility of resistance. The communication ended abruptly. All ships, battle stations, Murphy ordered. Remember the plan. Draw them in close. On the colony below, Colonel John Russell watched the sky darken as the massive Keldorian ships moved into attack positions. His soldiers looked up with expressions ranging from fear to determination. Eyes forward, he barked. Those ships aren't our concern. We hold the ground no matter what falls from the sky. The first attack came without warning. Brilliant beams of energy lanced down from the Keldorian ships, striking the orbital defense platforms. 3 platforms exploded immediately, sending debris tumbling toward the planet. Return fire, Murphy commanded. The human fleet launched a coordinated attack, their weapons seeming pitifully small against the massive Keldorian vessels. Direct hit on enemy flagship, Lieutenant Wright reported. Minimal damage to their shields. The space around New Horizon erupted into chaos. Keldorian ships fired relentlessly, their superior numbers allowing them to target each human vessel, with multiple attackers. The UESC Defiant shuddered as energy blasts slammed into its shields. Shields at 60%, an officer reported. Hull breaches on decks 5 through 7. Maintain position, Murphy ordered. Keep them focused. On us. As the battle raged, smaller objects deployed from the human ships. Too small to be detected by Keldorian sensors, these infection drones carried billions of nanites toward the enemy vessels. Nanite deployment at 40%, Engineer Powell reported from her station. Initial infection successful on target, vessels 7, 12, and 23. The Keldorian attack intensified. A human destroyer exploded under concentrated fire, its crew having barely enough time to reach escape pods. 2 more human ships reported critical damage. In the colony's medical center, Chief Medical Officer Diana Scott worked frantically as casualties poured in. The building shook with each impact on the planetary shields. We need more blood supplies. In Section 3, she called out, her hand steady as she treated a soldier with severe burns, and get those power generators online in case we lose main power. Back in orbit, the battle appeared to be going exactly as the Keldorians had expected. The human fleet was taking heavy damage, forced into defensive positions around the colony. Keldorian ships pressed their advantage, their commanders confident in their overwhelming firepower. Then something unexpected happened. A Keldorian destroyer suddenly went dark, its weapons powering down and its engines failing. 2 more Keldorian ships nearby began experiencing similar malfunctions. On the Defiance bridge, Engineer Powell looked up from her console with a grim smile. Nanite infection reaching critical levels in first-wave targets. What's happening? High Commander Zolvex demanded as reports flooded in from his fleet. Why are these ships losing power? Unknown, High Commander, his second-in-command replied. They report system failures across all decks. Backup systems are also failing. Impossible, Zolvex growled. Their weapons couldn't cause this kind of damage. More Keldorian ships began experiencing problems. Navigation systems directed vessels into collision courses. Weapon systems targeted other Keldorian ships. Communication arrays broadcast gibberish or fell silent. Nanite infection at 60% across the fleet, Powell reported. Systems compromise accelerating. Murphy allowed himself a small smile. Now, Lieutenant Wright. Execute Phase 2. The human fleet suddenly shifted from defense to offense. They targeted the infected Keldorian ships specifically, their weapons now much more effective against the compromised shields and systems. On the Keldorian command ship, Confusion turned to alarm as High Commander Zulvex watched his carefully organized attack dissolve into chaos. Nearly 30 of his ships were now completely unresponsive to commands, drifting helplessly. Several more were firing on their own allies, their targeting systems hijacked. "Pull back," he finally ordered. "All functional ships withdraw immediately." "Sir, what about our disabled vessels?" his officer asked. Zulvex hesitated only briefly. "Leave them. We must report this to the Emperor." As the Keldorian fleet began its retreat, Murphy allowed himself to relax slightly. "Damage report?" "3 ships lost, Captain," Lieutenant Wright replied. 7 more with significant damage. Planetary defenses holding at 30% capacity. "And the nanite infection?" Engineer Powell checked her readings. "The retreating Keldorian ships are all carrying nanites, Captain. The infection will spread to their other fleets when they dock." Murphy nodded. "Just as planned." He opened a channel to the planet below. "Commander Martinez, status of the colony?" "We're still standing, Captain," came the tired but proud reply. "Colonel Russell's forces are dealing with some Keldorian landing parties, but we have things under control." On the surface, Colonel Russell and his soldiers moved through the streets, securing areas where Keldorian dropships had managed to land troops. The alien soldiers fought ferociously but without coordination as their communication systems failed. In the medical center, Dr. Scott treated both human and Keldorian wounded. "They bleed just like us," she remarked to a nurse. "Different color, but same principle." Back on the Defiant, Captain Murphy watched the Keldorian retreat on the view screen. Admiral Clark stood beside him, her face showing satisfaction at their planned success. "They still don't understand," Murphy said quietly. "This isn't about the ships we destroy. It's about the ones we let escape." Admiral Clark nodded. Phase 1 complete. Now we wait for the infection to spread through their empire. The battle for New Horizon was over, but the real victory was just beginning. As the damaged human fleet regrouped and began repairs, the retreating Keldorian vessels carried within them the tiny machines that would bring the mighty empire to its knees. The grand hall of the Imperial Palace on Zul'Qadar buzzed with anxious voices. High-ranking military officers and government officials gathered in groups, their conversations urgent and worried. The gleaming walls that once displayed the pride of the Keldorian Empire now seemed to mock them as reports of failing systems came in from across their vast territory. High Commander Zulvex stood before the Emperor's throne, his normally confident posture now stiff with tension. Emperor Draknar, an ancient Keldorian whose gray-blue skin had faded to a pale slate color with age, leaned forward, his 6 eyes narrowed in anger. "Explain again," the Emperor demanded, "how 15 primitive human vessels defeated our attack fleet." Zulvex struggled to find words that wouldn't sound like excuses. "My Emperor, their tactics were unexpected. Our ships experienced widespread system failures. Weapons, engines, communications, all stopped working without explanation. And now these malfunctions are spreading throughout our empire?" The Emperor's voice was dangerously quiet. "Yes, Emperor. 73 major military installations have reported similar failures. 3 colony worlds have lost all defensive capabilities. Our scientists cannot explain." "Cannot explain?" The Emperor's voice boomed across the hall, silencing all other conversations. "We are the Keldorian Empire. We have conquered 17 species across 200 star systems. And you tell me our scientists cannot explain how these humans defeated us?" Before Zulvex could respond, a military aide rushed into the hall, approaching the throne with clear urgency. He whispered something to the Emperor's personal guard, who then relayed the message to Draknar. The Emperor's expression changed from anger to something Zulvex had never seen before on a Keldorian ruler's face. "Fear. A human vessel has entered our system," the Emperor announced to the stunned hall. "A single ship approaches Zul'Qadar." On board the UESC Defiant, Captain Alan Murphy stood on the bridge, watching the Keldorian homeworld grow larger on the view screen. 3 weeks had passed since the battle at New Horizon. In that time, the nanite infection had spread throughout the Keldorian Empire exactly as planned. "Status of the planetary defenses?" Murphy asked. Lieutenant Wright checked her readings. Nanite infiltration complete, Captain. Their defense grid is under our control. Their ships in orbit are experiencing 90% systems failure. Admiral Clark, who had insisted on joining this final mission, nodded in satisfaction. Open. A channel to their leadership. When the communication connected, they saw the Keldorian Emperor himself, surrounded by his advisors. The once proud High Commander Zolvek stood to the side, his posture defeated. "This is Admiral Patricia Clark of the United Earth Space Command," Clark announced formally. "I come with the authority to speak for all of humanity." "What have you done to our empire?" Emperor Draknar demanded, his voice trembling with rage. Captain Murphy stepped forward. "What you're experiencing is the result of underestimating humanity, Emperor. You mocked our small fleet, believing that quantity determines strength. Your weapons," Zulvex began. "Not weapons," Engineer Samantha Powell corrected, joining Murphy and Clark on screen. "Adaptive nanite technology, microscopic machines, that can replicate and reprogram your technology from within." The Emperor sank back onto his throne. "You've destroyed us without firing a shot." "No," Admiral Clark said firmly. "We could have, but we didn't. Your life support systems remain untouched. Your civilian infrastructure is operational. We targeted only your military capabilities." Confusion spread across the Keldorian faces. This wasn't how conquerors behaved. "I don't understand," the Emperor said. "Why show restraint when you could eliminate us entirely?" Murphy exchanged a glance with Admiral Clark before answering. "Because humanity has learned from its own bloody history that victory without mercy creates only future enemies. We came seeking peace. You chose war. And now?" Zulvex asked. "Now we negotiate," Admiral Clark said. "Our ship will dock at your station. We will meet face-to-face to discuss terms." 2 hours later, Murphy, Clark, and Powell sat across from the Keldorian leaders in a grand conference room. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. "These are our terms," Admiral Clark began. "First, the Keldorian Empire will recognize the sovereignty of Earth and all human colonies. Second, you will withdraw your forces from the borders of human space. Third, you will enter into a non-aggression pact with humanity, to be enforced by mutual oversight." Emperor Draknar's eyes narrowed. "And in return?" "In return," Powell said, "we will provide the deactivation codes for the nanites. Your systems will be restored within 7 days." "Just like that?" Zulvex asked suspiciously. "You cripple our empire and then simply give us back control?" Murphy leaned forward. "There's one more condition. The Keldorian Empire will join Earth in forming an interstellar cooperative alliance. Equal representation, shared technology, mutual defense." The Emperor laughed bitterly. "You want us to become your allies? After this?" "We want to break the cycle," Clark explained. "Your empire has grown through conquest. Ours will not. We believe there's a better way forward. Cooperation rather than domination." As proof of good faith, Powell activated a small device she had brought. "I've just sent the restoration codes for your capital's life support backup systems. They were never infected, but this should demonstrate our sincerity." A Keldorian technician confirmed this with obvious surprise. "It's true, Emperor. The systems are responding." The negotiations continued for hours. At times, they nearly broke down completely as centuries of Keldorian pride clashed with human determination. But slowly, realization dawned on the Emperor and his advisors. They had no choice. Their mighty empire had been brought to its knees by a species they had dismissed as insignificant. Finally, Emperor Draknar spoke. "Your terms are acceptable. We will sign your treaty." As the formal documents were prepared, High Commander Zulvex approached Captain Murphy in a quiet corner of the room. "I must understand," the Keldorian said. "How did you do it? How did your tiny fleet defeat our armada?" Murphy considered his answer carefully. "We adapted. Humanity has always faced challenges greater than ourselves: disease, natural disasters, our own worst impulses. We survived because we learned to overcome our limitations through innovation. Zolvex nodded slowly. We have been the apex predator for so long, we forgot what it means to be hunted. Exactly, Murphy replied. We couldn't match your numbers, so we developed something better. Quality over quantity. The signing ceremony was broadcast throughout both human and Keldorian territories. As Captain Murphy watched Admiral Clark and Emperor Draknar apply their signatures to the treaty, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. They had gambled everything on this strategy, and it had worked. High Commander Zolvex stood beside the Emperor, his expression thoughtful as he addressed the gathering. We mocked humanity's tiny fleet, he admitted, but failed to understand what it represented. Not weakness, but efficiency. Not limitation, but specialization. Captain Murphy stepped forward to add his signature as Earth's military representative. The measure of a civilization isn't the size of its fleet, he said, but in its capacity for both innovation and compassion. I hope our peoples can now demonstrate both. 6 months later, Murphy stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Interstellar Cooperative Alliance headquarters, built in neutral space between human and Keldorian territories. Ships from both civilizations moved peacefully through the space lanes. Science teams worked together on new technologies. Cultural exchanges flourished. Admiral Clark joined him, watching a massive Keldorian cruise ship pass by, now carrying tourists rather than weapons. Did you ever imagine this outcome when they were mocking our fleet, she asked. Murphy shook his head. I hoped, but I wasn't certain. The nanites worked better than we expected. Humanity's first interstellar conflict, Clark mused, and hopefully our last. Maybe that's our true strength, Murphy suggested. Not that we win our battles, but that we try to make them unnecessary. As they watched the stars together, humanity's future expanded before them, not as conquerors, but as partners in a growing alliance of worlds.